This is Steve Zeltzer with WorkWeek, and we've been covering artificial intelligence and the effect it's going to have on working people. And the writers right now have a national strike of 11,000 writers, and one of the critical issues is the introduction of AI into that industry. Some writers have said it's an existential crisis for them as far as AI and the future of their industry and living wage jobs for writers. And the Screen Actors Guild has taken a strike vote, and they may be going out on strike as well. And ground center for AI is in San Francisco, California, which has been a haven for tech companies, but also a place where the entry of remote control cars have really developed full scale. And we're going to talk about that and what that means for the future of workers, taxi workers, and other workers who drive in not only San Francisco, but in the United States. And joining us today is Sue Vauhan. She's a writer, San Francisco public transit activist, and has been covering the buses and also other environmental issues around the transit issues in San Francisco. Mark Gruber is with San Francisco Taxi Workers Alliance. He's chair of the Alliance. Edward Escobar, who's with the Alliance of Independent Workers. Gord Magill, he's a commentator on the trucking industry, and he blogs at autonomoustruckers.substack.com. And also Will Cook, who's founder America Without Drivers, and has been an industry veteran for 34 years of experience as a professional truck driver. So welcome to our show. Why don't we go first to this new situation in San Francisco? The companies that are testing these remote cars they're operating now without drivers, and they want to bring in a couple of hundred more of these remote control cars into San Francisco used as taxis. What effect would that have on taxi workers and drivers in San Francisco? Mark?
Yeah, well, of course, this is part of a much larger problem, but in terms of the effect in San Francisco, we are the hotbed we're the belly of the beast on this. And Cruiz, which is a subsidiary of General Motors, and Waymo, which is part of Alphabet or Google, they have been testing these cars for the past couple of years. They now have permits from the DMV and the CPUC to operate them without a driver in the driver's seat. And they're looking to expand that to 24/7 operations all over the city of San Francisco with no limitations on the numbers. And those numbers are small now. Cruiz is talking about 100 vehicles, but we know they have many more than that on the street. Most of them are still being operated with drivers, but they have 100 ready to go 24/7 all over town. And they have an application into the federal government for as many as 10,000 of these vehicles. And they are operating in a couple of other cities, Phoenix and Austin. But we expect that the largest influx and the first influx will be in San Francisco. This this poses an incredible threat to the jobs of people who are drivers, like taxi drivers, TNC drivers as well. That's just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of the kinds of problems that they could potentially cause, many of which are have to do with safety. Even in the short span of time that they have been operating, these vehicles have been involved in numerous incidents. They have been blocking roads. They have been there have been a number of incidents where they've interfered with firefighting operations. They drive through crime scene, yellow tape on crime scenes. One time, a firefighter actually had to break a window on one of these cars to stop it from rolling. And yet, the DMV, which is the regulator of their safety, and the CPUC, the Public Utilities Commission of California, which regulates their passenger operations, are basically giving them a green light. They're not doing anything to, stop them from forging straight ahead. A lot of this has to do, I believe, and others as well, that this has to do with not only kowtowing to the companies that are doing this, but also they see themselves in competition with other states, and they want California to be, at the top of the heap and to get there first. So this is a really serious problem.
And Susan, you've been fighting some of this introduction of this technology, and you've been thwarted by the city and by the state. Why don't you talk about this history? Because didn't start today with these remote cars, but it seems like there's a long history of the introduction of this technology without really any oversight and safety and environmental protection.
So the SFMTA, in my opinion, it's pushing back a little bit on the introduction of these driverless cars right now, but it has served as a protection racket for these industries, and it's shameful. It's really shameful. It served as a protection racket for the tech shuttle buses, which operate illegally in our public bus stops. Don't let anyone ever tell you it's legal for them to be in our public bus stops. It's not. The California Vehicle Code has not been changed. And that happened in 2014. In 2018, the SFMTA started rolling out these red carpet lanes on Geary Boulevard. Again, according to the Vehicle Code, when you legislate a transit lane, transit is public by definition, and they were permitting private buses like casino buses, the tech shuttles, tour buses, you name it, to operate in the red lanes. Now, I do notice they're getting a little bit of a spine. It's good to see that this letter, the SFCTA has put out a letter, and I believe the SFMTA and the SFMTA, Jeffrey Tumlin, they're pushing back on these driverless vehicles. That's very good. They're getting ready to legislate the extension of the red lanes on Geary Boulevard from Stanyan out west on Geary Boulevard. I'm not sure what the cutoff is. It's like 33rd or 34th Avenue. Those will be strictly for transit, and they're publicly stating that. So it's good to see them pushing back. But the SFMTA up until now has had an absolutely shameful record of serving as a protection racket for Uber. And with these driverless vehicles, if so a year ago, the SFMTA approved a pilot to let Uber start dispatching San Francisco taxi cabs with the Uber app, and Uber gets to set the meter rates. And Mark can talk more about this more. If these driverless cars are running around picking up, using the Uber dispatch to pick up and discharge passengers, I'm concerned if, they're competing with cab drivers, and I don't think they're going to have access to the red lanes on Geary Boulevard, but they will throughout the rest of the city. So they're going to be making money in zones that should be restricted to transit, to cabs, and to our public buses.
Thank you. And the issue of drivers, not only union drivers or drivers who work for taxi companies, they're threatened with destruction. I think it's an existential crisis if these cars are allowed to operate. I know that they've been causing accidents. They stop in the middle of the street, which is illegal to pick up passengers. They're not enforcing the traffic laws. It seems like Mayor London Breed and the supervisors have allowed this to go on, and as well as Governor Newsom. And Edward, what is the role of the government in protecting us? Because it seems like this technology and these companies are basically have a free hand to do what they want.
The government's participation has been primarily pay to play. The tech titans have ridden roughshod over society, and basically there has been no oversight. I think that springboarding off of Mark's statement about competition with other states, and it goes beyond that to China. There's this competition when it comes to technology that I think that the Biden administration is very fearful to step on the toes of technology, and they want to keep them on their side, working definitely focused to try to keep the U.S. in some kind of competitive level with technology. So no, it's not. I mean, they're just allowed to ride roughshod, and there's no concern about the future of work. The precarious workers have been even made more precarious. There's no discussion, even with organized labor. I have brought this to their attention years ago, and there's just no interest in discussing it. You see Teamsters now expressing interest because it's quite obvious that the truckers are going to be permanently displaced. But that's what we're looking at for all drivers, is to be permanently displaced. So it's really problematic, and it's something that, the narrative needs to be driven from the key stakeholders from the trenches, which is us drivers and those activists that support drivers.
And Will, you've been covering this issue. Why don't you talk about your experience as a professional truck driver? Because millions of truck drivers could be displaced. Goldman Sachs has said that 300 million workers around the world might lose their jobs as a result of AI.
Well, at present, there are 3.5 million jobs which require a commercial driver's license. Round about that. Not quite all of them are for, as understood, truckers. About 1.8 million would be long haul. The balance would be local delivery drivers. So we're talking about a lot of people's jobs on the line. But one of the things that bothers me about the pushing of the autonomous vehicle technology onto society, like over and above the issues around displacing people, throwing them out of work, how that's going to reverberate through society, is the narrative they're using to push it, which is almost actually a carbon copy of the narrative used by large carriers as represented by corporate organizations like the American Trucking Association. They've been harping on for years about a supposed truck driver shortage, and these robot trucks are going to come, and they're not really taking people's jobs. We need more truck drivers, and we don't have them, which is a lie. They've been pushing this lie for decades, and they're still pushing it now. And instead of using it as they normally do to get corporate welfare to subsidize their CDL schools, to bring in all kinds of people into the industry who maybe shouldn't be involved in it, they're now using it to justify putting these autonomous trucks on the road. And it's just a lie. There's an organization called CDL Drivers Unlimited who've done some research into this, and they've found that there's well over 8 million active CDL licenses in the United States. And if there's only 3.5 million jobs, that means there's over twice as many licenses, which speaks to the retention problem in the trucking industry. So if the trucking industry doesn't ever actually want to fix itself, it doesn't want to pay people correctly, it doesn't want to improve the training standards so as to actually fix safety for real. So they're relying on these autonomous trucks to come in. Obviously, that'll also deal with drivers' wages, which is the big golden pot here. In October of 2022, Bloomberg put out a really interesting article about how autonomous vehicle development had sort of hit a snag, and a bunch of companies were slowing down their research and pulling out of it in the car market, but the autonomous truck market was still going forward full steam, and that's because they want to replace us. It's estimated that there's $200 billion in drivers' wages on the table in the United States, and that's what they're coming for.
And the introduction of this technology, is there a concern about safety of these trucks, autonomous trucks on the roads? And how would they have it without really creating a lot of havoc in the transport system in the United States?
Well, as far as the safety stuff goes, they're running test runs on them. Interestingly enough, only in the Sun Belt, California, Arizona, Texas, because the LiDAR systems that they're using to get down the road and detect obstructions and whatnot only really work in good weather. And some of the marketing coming from the autonomous truck manufacturers will admit that their technology is limited, and all of their testing is still being done with drivers in the cab. Often enough, they have teams of support vehicles going down the road with them because they sort of understand what's at stake when an 80,000-pound vehicle might go cattywampus when the code doesn't quite work as they expect. And they're basically trying to say they're only going to use them on the interstate when they first start to launch them. As the technology improves, they're saying they're going to put that technology on smaller delivery vehicles to work in urban environments, but that remains to be seen.
And Gord, this autopilot technology that you have in Tesla seems to have killed people, killed drivers, passengers, and pedestrians. What do you think is going to happen with the introduction of autonomous trucks?
I would hate to think what would happen if they hurt anybody. The technology for the cars and the trucks is much the same. It's just a matter of scale. One of the little uncomfortable things they don't like to talk about with regard to truck accidents is often enough the majority of incidents involving cars and trucks are actually found to be the fault of the car driver. And so I'm not quite sure if it matters so much which vehicle has the technology implemented it, because in any interaction between two vehicles, the smaller vehicle can cause just as much trouble as the bigger one. And if the technology is all the same, the concern one would have with an autonomous Tesla car or an autonomous Uber truck is basically the same.
And Gord, you want to add this? Gord?
They've already had a couple accidents. Waymo had an accident down in Texas. The accidents that they've had have been pretty big, pretty good sized accidents. And what they're doing is they're brushing them under the rug, though. I'd have to go back. I wasn't really prepared to do this, but I could give you where and the dates. It was just this past, last May, I believe. Edward, didn't we talk about it? Gord, you guys know about that accident. So following up with what Gord said, when these trucks crash, you're not seeing as many truck crashes. That's because of the controlled environment that they're doing. They're having on the computers. But when they crash, it's ugly. And it's out of whack. The other thing is where we're saying that they're just running them down south. That's not necessarily true. They're testing already in Minnesota. They had a place up there, Aurora, actually partnered with Snyder, and they're testing on winter driving. They tested all this winter. They're just not. I stand corrected. Putting it out. Yep, they're just not putting it out that they're doing it. They're not doing it on the interstate. They're doing it on private property. You know how Snyder had them tanker courses and all that. Remember, Gord, back? That's what they're doing in Minnesota. They tested in Minnesota, and I believe they tested in Wisconsin this past year.
Okay, Mark, taxi drivers have been under serious stress in San Francisco as a result of deregulation. They broke the Teamsters Union, who used to represent taxi drivers in San Francisco. They're struggling to survive, taxi drivers. What has been the response of labor and the politicians? Because we're looking at the possible destruction of taxi drivers.
Well, we haven't seen any real sounding of concern from politicians. It's sort of one leaving the job to somebody else. The DMV, they've left it in the hands of the DMV. They've left it in the hands of the CPUC. The city says that they can't do anything because it's state controlled. The DMV has been really roundly criticized for their role in this. They have the power to suspend the operations of these companies, but after multiple accidents, multiple incidents, they have never suspended a company even for a day for any operational defect. And some of these things, I mean, there've been incidents. There was one time where like 12 of the cruise vehicles congregated on Gough Street, stopped in the middle of an intersection on Gough Street, tied up traffic for hours. There was no suspension there. There was another incident in March. There have been accidents with injuries. There have been at least 2 recalls of crews of their own vehicles, where they've had to reprogram every vehicle in their fleet because of operational defects. The DMV won't do anything about it. And in Sacramento, they have also taken a hands-off position. There is a bill right now, maybe the truckers can talk about it. There is a bill in the state legislature having to do with trucking and requiring a driver in the driver's seat for at least the next 5 years while these things are being tested. But basically, there has been a big yawn on the part of the politicians for the most part.
And Sue, the blatant violation of the vehicle code by these buses from Silicon Valley, other tech companies, and now the allowing of these remote controlled vehicles as taxis on the streets. They stop in the middle of the street. I've seen it, which is illegal under the vehicle code. No enforcement. Haven't these agencies really been captured by the companies they're supposed to regulate? It seems that London Breed and Gavin Newsom are representing these tech companies who want to get rid of drivers and basically have a free hand to do what they want.
They have been captured. And Loretta Lynch, there are 2 Loretta Lynches. There's the one who is the Attorney General under Obama. And then there's the other one who is the on the CPUC many years ago. And I heard her speak once. She was a very good commissioner when she was on the CPUC. And I heard her speak a few years ago at an event about Uber and Lyft. And she explained that the CPUC is it's a vast agency, but there are only 5 commissioners. And it's a lot easier to bribe 5 commissioners. It's a lot easier to pressure them than it is to go to the state legislature and try to bribe all of the legislatures, all the members of the legislature, to pressure all the members of the legislature. So yeah, the CPUC is a captured agency. The SFMTA is a captured agency. It's supposed to be independent. In my opinion, Proposition A, which was passed in 2007, I voted for it. Jake McGoldrick and Gerardo Sandoval were going around telling people, don't vote for it. This is transferring power from the Board of Supervisors to this unelected group, and they're all appointed by the mayor. They have to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. And they were right, in my opinion. I made a mistake in voting for that all that power should have rested with the Board of Supervisors, those elected people. We made a mistake in transferring that power. Captured agencies.
And Uber and Lyft spent $200 million to basically allow them to continue to operate with non-employees, even though there are employees working. You have deregulation, you have FedEx workers who are actually working for subcontractors in this country. Amazon has lots of subcontractors. It seems that this is a ruse to get rid of paying workers living wages, having any control over their lives.
So Prop 22 did not pass in San Francisco, but statewide it passed, unfortunately. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And one of the things about that we have discussed before is when it was AB5 was in effect, they were supposed to pay workers' comp insurance for workers. These companies, they never did, and they were never prosecuted by Rob Bonta, the Attorney General, which it is a crime, a misdemeanor, not to pay workers' comp insurance for drivers. So if drivers get injured and they don't have any health care insurance, who pays? It's the public, the county, the state. So it's basically another form of cost shifting onto the public. Now, Edward, you've been active in trying to get fighting Prop 22 and also fighting to protect these drivers, whether they're union or non-union. It seems like that you have one obstacle after another, and your effort to go to politicians has not resulted in any kind of development.
Right. As you mentioned, 205 million was spent by a coalition of Uber, the tech titans, Uber, DoorDash, Lyft, Instacart, Postmates, and that's the most spent in ballot initiative history for proposition, and they were successful. The unions only spent about under $15 million, if that tells you anything. But the problem is that their messaging was all wrong. There was even a New York Times article that addressed that. Whereas the Tech Titans Coalition was stating that drivers want to be real independent contractors, that they have been and they want to continue being. The union organized labor's response was that drivers deserve a pathway to a union and a living wage, which does not address the real issue, which is the fact that these folks are not real independent contractors, nor were they ever independent contractors to begin with, nor would Uber or Lyft allow them to be real independent contractors if they had anything to do with it, because they're basically misclassifying these workers, calling them independent contractors, fake news, and yet they're treating them worse than part-time minimum wage employees. And those folks even have more rights than the drivers. So what's this doing? It's not just undermining drivers, it's just undermining workers in general. In the temple of labor, you have two pillars. You have independent contractors and you have employees. Both of them are workers, yes, but they both play a crucial role. And the corporations, they have both in their brick and mortar locations. They hire both. They hire the employees because the amount of control that they exercise, they dictate the manner in which they perform their services. There's the setting of the rates, terms, and conditions for an employee, which an independent contractor is supposed to retain that type of control of establishing their own rates, terms, and conditions. If you think in terms of a contractor, as in a plumber, an electrician, a carpenter, they perform that and they have that kind of control over their work and the outcome. Also, the IRS tax code says that they cannot dictate the manner in which they perform their services. Now, you see this is blatantly ignored. The Fair Labor Standards Act is in violation. National Labor Relations Act is in violation. So what is it's lack of will on behalf of legislators, politicians, regulators to actually do their job. That's what it comes down to. Who ends up paying the bill at the end that funds the bottom line corporate profits? It's taxpayers. It's taxpayers. People talk about government money. No, it's taxpayers' money, because there's no safety net provided for these workers. What do they fall back on? County services, all the services provided by taxpayers. So it's the middle class, the working class, that gets squeezed out of existence more and more.
And Mark, you've tried to go to the legislators in San Francisco, Phil Ting, I mean, all of them, Scott Wiener, all of them. What have they done? I mean, they have a lot of power in the legislature. Have they had hearings on even the dangers of AI, the dangers to the public, and also the effect it will have on displacing large numbers of workers? I mean, one of the things that we can look at with AI is that large numbers of workers will be displaced and there's no place to go for these workers.
Yeah, this is a problem that's being ignored. California sees itself as a tech-friendly place. They want to be, at the the forefront technological innovations. Silicon Valley, has an awful lot of power. Many of the Democratic players in the legislature represent, Silicon Valley or other areas of, high, including San Francisco, where we have, so much high tech. And this is being allowed to play out, with very little oversight, with very little concern, and what's going, and the warning signs are there. I mean, they're more than there about the potential for job losses. We're not just talking about transportation jobs. We're talking about jobs of every type. And now, with the advances in artificial intelligence, so many jobs are at risk. I mean, it goes from top to bottom. What's at risk in this, and there just seems to be way too much complacency about it. So I don't know, maybe at some point, people will wake up, but I'm afraid it's going to be too late, and by then the damage will have been done.
Well, I think the writers are taking a stand. They have a strong union, and they have said that they have to be able to take it on because they may not be in a position anymore if they continues to be introduced this AI to their industry without any control regulation. And who controls it, who owns it? The billionaires, the capitalists, and they want to make more profit by getting rid of drivers, by getting rid of writers and other workers. So there's going to be a hearing on the 29th of the MTA on the issue of these automated cars, remote control taxis in San Francisco. And you think people should go to that and raise that issue about allowing these remote control cars in San Francisco, remote control taxis, to be on the streets when they haven't been fully tested? They're testing them on people. I know that Elon Musk, who is supported by Gavin Newsom, was allowed to keep his factory open during the COVID pandemic. There was a shelter-in-place order, and the pilot system that he has is killing people. There are all kinds of accidents of passengers, workers, the drivers, the pedestrians, and nothing happens to him. It seems to me he should be criminally prosecuted if he's putting products on the road to supposedly that can work, and they don't work, and they kill people. I'd say that would be a crime.
I agree. I'm taking notes here. And yes, people should go out on the 29th, or you should send an email in. And I'm going to send an email out. I'm going to do an email blast about a few things. But yeah, it's really important for people to speak up and say, not ready for prime time, not ready to be on the streets of San Francisco, maybe never.
Let me impart this wisdom from the theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, who stated the demise of humanity would come from where? He stated technology. And he said that the AI automation, he said self-driving technology was going to be the kicking off point for this whole paradigm shift to occur. We are right there right now, people. So as far as a warning shot or a warning call, a wake-up call to everyone, it's not now. It was last year. It was a decade ago that we should have had these discussions already, because we have to help shape the future of work. Otherwise, none will exist for the worker.
Okay, well, I want to thank you all of us for joining us on WorkWeek. And obviously, this is an issue for immediately and for the future of all working people, not just in the United States, but globally, who face AI and the effect it will have on the society, the public, and working people. So thanks for joining us.